Hello, and thanks for joining us for the Friends of the Farms lecture series. Each session is designed to deliver a small and in-depth dose of cannabis education. My name is Candace Hawes, and I want to thank all of our viewers and customers from the pharmacy, the pottery, and the Natural Healing Center, as well as all of our friends joining us from around the world. Please make sure to hit subscribe so you get notified when we post any future cannabis content. Today, we're going to be welcoming Antonio Frazier, the current chair of the DCC Cannabis Advisory Subcommittee on testing laboratories, and also the founder of Fire Consults. Working with cannabis consumers ground level, I know that many are not even aware of the Department of Cannabis Control, not even aware of the advisory committee, or even the work that they're doing, and on many fronts to better the regulations for the cannabis industry and our consumers. That's why I'm so pleased to have Antonio with us today to talk about his role in the subcommittee. Antonio Frazier is a lab executive and engineer whose career has always been focused on public safety. He now leads his own consulting firm, Fire Consults, where he focuses on lab and manufacturing quality assurance, operations, and business development. Whether it be ensuring that critical jet engines components are fit for duty or cannabis products are safe for patients, Antonio has always worked to ensure that high-quality products are safe to enter the market. Antonio was the first Furman University athlete to complete a dual degree, earning both a BS in Materials Engineering from Clemson University and a BS in Physics from Furman University. Both really hard degrees. Those are not easy degrees, either one of them. And it was that in school where he was earning both those degrees and also playing football, where he met CannaSafe CEO Aaron Riley. Antonio joined CannaSafe in 2017 as the Director of Operations. He was Aaron's first hire. And after taking over CannaSafe, he was asked and tasked to secure the quality system and preparing the lab for the large scale volume. After helping CannaSafe land on the INC 5000 fast growing company list, Antonio was named the president of the company in 2020. CannaSafe sold in late 2022, and since then, Antonio has been in the consulting role. He currently sits in the California Cannabis Advisory Committee, where he serves as a subcommittee chair for testing laboratories, and he'll talk a little bit more about what that means and what they've been doing. Thank you so much for being with us, Antonio. I'm so pleased to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, Candace, and thanks for the lovely intro there. I'm excited to chat a little bit. It's been a while since I talked to consumers. So the presentation here today, like we said, focused on ensuring cannabis safety, what that is, what it means to you. And for a little background for everyone on the call, a lot of this is specific to California, but our regulations are a little more stringent in some places, but pretty similar to what you're going to do within any market. So I'm speaking specifically to California, but definitely going to give everyone a great oversight to what cannabis testing is, which is the same thing all across the globe. So with that being said, can I dive in?
Yeah, please. I do. I see people watching from Taipei, from Maryland, from like all over. So this is really cool. So yeah, thank you so much for being with us, and let's please dive in.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, a little bit more about me than what Candace said. I'm also a board member of Americans for Safe Access. So I've been working on federal policy and access for patients on a global scale, really, with Steph Scherer for about 4 years now. And with that, I also run our patient-focused certification program, which provides training, certifications to cannabis businesses throughout the country. So with this being said, my perspective is one that is focused on just making sure things are what they say they are and that they're proper for consumption. And I believe that's everyone's right, to have safe legal access to cannabis. There's much worse things that we're being fed and proliferated with that are doing damage to us. But anyway, that's more about where I come from and how I stand on this perspective. Well, first, let's talk about what is cannabis safety testing. Well, California requires that all legal cannabis products be tested for potency and safety. Potency must be labeled and displayed on the packaging, which is probably one of the biggest reasons why we have some of the issues we're having. The potency is pretty deliberately and purposely by the regulations at the forefront of the consumer's attention as they're reviewing packaging. So potency is something that has really become a big talking point, a big factor in the legal cannabis market, whereas it may not be necessarily the best dictator of quality, but we'll get back to that in a little bit. how it works. So licensed distributors or micro businesses must submit to licensed laboratories in final packaging. So that means products must be as consumers are going to consume them during testing. This is to make sure there's no more processing or no more steps to be done that could potentially make the product fail or be mislabeled. The only exception to this, though, is bulk flour, which can be packaged later, and that's actually going to be brought up an example that we're going to use later to show you the process. How it's also supposed to work is that the cannabis lab is supposed to randomly sample from a batch of product to flower and bring it back to their lab for compliance testing. So essentially, a lab is supposed to go out to a distributor, observe the entire batch of product, and then randomly select from within that batch enough composite sample to bring back to the lab and test. The sample is meant to be representative of the entire batch, and that is the intent. Is that's what's happening. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but that is how this is all set up. So there's meant to be a very transparent process from seed to sale by the DCC to allow to allow cannabis to get to the shelves and be tested. Also, labs interact with producers by providing R&D or research and development samples, and that can be for quality control or research purposes. So, for instance, before someone may submit for compliance, they may do a full panel, um, a full panel R&D test to see if it will pass compliance beforehand. There's also other cool things that people can do, like stability and shelf life testing. Those are things that are required in other federally regulated industries like food and candy and other things that we see similar to cannabis that doesn't have THC in it, and things that will come along as the industry grows and develops. Probably Schedule 3 for those type of product type will include things like shelf life stability studies, because the recalls we're going to talk about later, a lot of them probably are generated from packaging issues more so than someone potentially putting moldy flour into the market on purpose or with any intent. There's also other things like particle size. So, say someone's making a drink or a nano emulsion for quicker onset. They can actually test those particle sizes to then advertise, what those ranges are. I mean, that gets really medicinal, but those are things that labs have the capability of doing to support the cannabis market. So, just to give you an idea, so I'm going to talk to you through all the compliance testing, and those are just two things there that we're also seeing people request and want to think for the future. Can I ask you a question, Candace? Is my camera filter going crazy as well for you?
At times it is, but just at times, kind of like when you lean back just a little bit.
You think lean back will help?
Yeah, like just there for just a little bit.
Oh, that disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, we're going to see if we can just move through it. But it's the important part to listen. And the slides are what we should be focused on. That being said, what does it mean for you? Well, these are the things that the DCC is requiring testing for. Every legal product must be tested for potency, which is going to give you an idea of what cannabinoids are there. Predominantly THC and CBD are the main regulated ones, but some labs test for up to like 18 cannabinoids. So if you understand what those different ones can deliver to you, you can potentially get that insight from a COA. Pesticides. Well, some people spray pesticides or want to spray pesticides for cultivation since it's of higher yield, cost savings to ensure their crop isn't going to be ruined before harvest. Well, we test to ensure there are no residual pesticides. That means some of them are below certain action limits, and some of them are not tolerable whatsoever. So they are automatically failures if they're seen on a COA. And this is the fun fact everyone loves to talk about, is that on this list of pesticides, there's a nasty compound called mycoblutenol. It is the active ingredient in the trade pesticide Eagle 20, which is federally banned now and not allowed for use on pretty much anything. But this nasty little chemical, when heated above its boiling point, which is around 400 degrees Celsius, can break down into hydrogen chloride, hydrogen cyanide, and nitrogen oxide, all things that can be toxic at even low levels. And if you use things like a butane lighter, you can't actually reach those temperatures. So yeah, maybe not with your doobie and a regular lighter, you'll see those temperatures, but you most certainly can if you're dabbing or doing some other kind of heat application. So you must be aware of some of this stuff. And this is why you hear some of the old dogs say, oh, well, I never died from smoking pesticide weed anyway. Well, maybe you're not sick enough. Maybe your immune system is healthy enough to allow you to do that in small amounts. But obviously, if you consistently poison yourself, there will be nasty effects to it.
Yeah.
Some of the other things are residual solvents. So say you take some trim, process it into an edible, concentrate, tincture, something as such. Sometimes that's done with solvents, and the DCC wants to ensure that there's not any residual solvents at a level that they have deemed unsafe to human consumption. So again, different levels and controls. They also have category 1 solvents and category 2 based upon level of threat, but we test for those as well for all products. Now we have moisture and water activity. These two things are more indicators of if something will have a microbial problem down the line by measuring how much water is available to encourage this kind of growth. And moisture also for the connoisseur can be used as a quality mechanism because it's what you're really controlling as the product is curing. So if you really are into your products, you may notice that some of the same strain, sometimes wetter or drier, you're going to have a different experience. How it tastes, everything's going to be different. How the wheat breaks down. So that is another quality control measure if you really want to get into it that deep. But we're going to keep it a little bit higher level. There's also microbial testing. So this is like Aspergillus, Salmonella, 4 different strains of Salmonella, E. coli, and 4 strains of Aspergillus are tested for. We all know why we don't want those things to be inhaled. So shouldn't have to explain that. And then finally, heavy metals. We test for the big 4 heavy metals. I want to say lead, arsenic, cadmium, and mercury. And these are all toxic metals. And it's important for cannabis because it's a phytoremediator. It pulls things out of the ground. So if you're growing in the ground, especially in California, in a very mineral-rich place, it's going to pull those things out of the ground. So if you don't have control over some of your inputs in your soil and your media, you can potentially introduce heavy metals into the plant, and it will retain and potentially be smoked, ingested, which we all also understand we don't want to have. So these are some of the things that we're looking at. We're going to walk through a COA later, and I want to say, there's also foreign material testing. So, for instance, I'm going to go to the next slide here. So, foreign material testing is like a filth test. So, you can have a fine product, but if, say, bad storage, dust, even there's a regulation that says excrement, so like rat poop, from bad storage. Any of these things actually adulterate the product enough to where you say it has contamination. That's also something that we look at as we are testing. And then finally, terpene testing. It's not required, but some people provide terpene testing for things that we're going to talk about here in a bit. So this is your first look at a compliant COA. So what we're going to do now is try to walk through what you may see if you ask for a COA, because legally a dispensary is supposed to be able to provide you with one. If you're in their store asking to buy a product, you should be able to see this, and this is going to help you understand what you could be looking for. So this is a compliant COA, a snippet of it, just a portion, or the summary page for a strain from Glasshouse called Dark Nebula. What I want you to look at here, I believe I can draw. I'm going to play. Kristen said Candace, said I had things of toys here, so I'm going to take a shot at it. Here we go. All right, so you'll see here the cannabinoid overview. This is, going to be different places and different COAs, but majority you're going to get a nice breakdown here: the THC, CBD, and then total cannabinoids. Those are the things that, like I said, the main 2 that we're regulating, and then this gives you an idea of total potency, which is required to be labeled on the product. So regardless of how you feel about THC, producers are required to place this in a pretty prominent place on their package. So, and we'll get to that in a bit. Also here, you have the summary of the tests I just mentioned. The green check here elucidated all passed. So this is a nice quick way for a store owner, manufacturer to say, okay, what's my potency I have to label? And then did everything pass the way that I expected to? And then they can go into the COA deeper if they care for. But these are the main things to look at when you're going over a COA, especially flower. They're related to the DCC and notices from them. what you have here is a batch number and a metric UID. These are two things that'll help you tie together samples from any DCC notices. Now we're going to knock on wood, cross our fingers. We never have anything from Glass House, but things do happen. And if you ever haven't noticed, this is how someone would be able to tie back to what the product was. This is basically it. This is what I would like you to focus on. There's other things to talk about here, but this is the simple way to understand how to get a quick read of the COA. Now, if we do go a little bit further into it, so maybe some of you are probably thinking, these pesticides just got me terrified. I don't want to smoke these. Like, I want to know. Well, this is how you can know. You go to the pesticide portion of the COA, and what you'll see here is if a lab is ISO accredited, you'll see their SOP that they're using and how they're testing for it and the date of test. Now, what I want to point out is that some of these have a failure limit here of any amount. This is what we call a category 1 pesticide. The DCC has declared that if they see any amount of this type of pesticide, the sample is deemed a failure. So that's going to be chlordane, chlorphenapure, what else we got here? Methyl propionate, dichlorals, all these different things the chemists can rattle off that the DCC says no. If the lab sees it, it's a failure. Now, the nasty one I was talking about earlier was microbutanol. It's here. The limit is 0.1 microgram per gram or ppm. And you'll see here Glass House's flower has a non-detect. This means the lab was not able to see any of this pesticide in this flower. And if you scroll through all of their results here, you'll see this was a non-detect all the way. So this was some cleanly, nicely grown flower with no pesticides that the DCC is currently regulating included. So this is a good indicator, especially if you're sick, you're trying to give flower to your grandma, someone older, someone on palliative care, someone that could potentially be harmed by this. What you have to realize is that cannabis was brought here medicinally for really, really sick people. So we may be fortunate enough to use it in more of a recreational way, but you have to remember, some people can't afford to smoke a chemical pesticide. Some people can't afford to ingest heavy metals, otherwise they could lose their life, or eat something with aspergillus or salmonella. These are people who are sicker than a lot of us are, so we have to be considerate of. What I say is respecting what got us here. Yes, it's cool that we have adult use now, but we can't forget about how we got here and what's important in our mission as cannabis operators.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I'm really thankful that we have all these tests that the DCC, has the cannabis operators, performing on all the different cannabis products, and it's different for every different kind of product. But I'm very thankful that we have all these tests nowadays, because for many years, many years, we didn't. And who knows, what was maybe slipping through the system. But nowadays, we have all these safety controls, and we have a better idea of what we're putting in our bodies, and we have consistency, which is really nice too for patients. We know exactly what we're taking, and that the products are consistently dosed. Back in the old days, we didn't. We had brownies, and maybe one side of the pan was stronger than the other side, and we didn't really know. It was like a guessing game. And now the DCC and all the testing has completely changed the game for patients. So I completely agree with you.
Absolutely true, right? And some people were able to figure out quality controls beforehand, but now you have data to back it up and prove what you say it is. So one more thing about flower. We're going to drop the live poll now. We're curious to know, what do you think defines flower? Is it THC content? Is it the nose, the smell? Is it the bud tender? Whoever, is helping you in the store. You just take whatever they pick out. Do you understand what terpenes are? Is that an indicator for you? Or is it packaging? Is it whatever packaging has a celebrity on it? Is it, whatever's funny looking? Like, what really helps you make a decision? These are some of the things that I know Glass House is curious about, scientists are curious about, because as a lab, you want to help provide that information. You want to help people be more confident in purchasing products, which means the manufacturers and producers are going to want to utilize that same assay or method that is created. So there's other things coming up, and labs are trying to get more and more creative about this, but this is what this question is about. So yeah, I would love everyone to take a quick click if they can, and we will talk about the results later. So boom, let's see here. Sorry, I have to submit my own answer so I can see the results. But yeah, but please, people, please submit. Here we go here. Now let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about this. So these are terpenes. So I'm going to talk about terpenes not because I'm saying they're the ultimate dictator of quality, but because it's something that's available on a compliant COA to help you make the best decision about your next purchase. So everyone needs to understand how terpenes affect them. So I'm not going to go into what research or what other information out there, may allude to what beta carophylline does. But what I will encourage you to do is research yourself and then journal. You should make a track, understand how you felt. Was it a bad experience, good experience? Did it taste good? Whatever is going to be important to you for your usage, you should journal because it's going to help you weed this stuff out. And how you can use terpene testing is the following. What I would advise is looking at the top 3 or 4. If the last 3 or 4 at the same level, sure, include them, but really look at the predominant terpenes there. That's going to be the top of. I've got to have my jar here. That's going to be the top here. These big here are going to be your predominant terpenes. So we have 2.1% terpenes, which is an excellent number. Very robust flower. Lots of different terpenes here as well. You'll see this with flower that's growing the way that glasshouse does. When it gets more of that natural sun and gets more of that light, it produces more of these terpenes. So you have a better aroma, which ultimately very, very small amounts of these terpenes or ketones and esters and other chemicals do make a difference. So please don't, disregard that it says 0.0974 mass percent, but that could have an impact on your experience, how your cannabinoids receive this product. So back to the point here is that look at the top few terpenes and also look at the ratios that they are to each other. Like beta carophylline is the dominant one, but look that up. Okay, well now we have about a third of that is lightalol, and then you have alpha humulene, beta myrcene, all there at about I'd say about a third of that level. So you see what the predominant one is, and then those other ones will, how I've learned over time, they will definitely have an accompanying taste or a different kind of smoke profile depending on what's there and at what amount. So this is one way just to track, right? This gives you the power. Unfortunately, without federal legalization, you can't necessarily buy the same cannabis in California that you can in Arkansas. Mm-hmm. This is going to help you when you go to Arkansas. If you can also review terpene results, you will have a much better chance of getting a medicine or product that you like if you understand these things. So this is trying to give you power to understand how to shop outside of the branding that we love, Glass House. I'm not saying we're looking outside of it, but this helps you with those situations where it isn't available for you. Yep. Even we know even in California, you go to 2 dispensaries on the same block, well, if that's even legal where it is. But anyway, in a very close proximity, different products on the shelf, different brands. It's not going to the gas station getting a Gatorade when you're thirsty because it's going to be there. Yeah. That is the trick of being a cannabis consumer, is that you're not always guaranteed to have a brand or even the strain that you may prefer. So that does make it tricky for us, but home grow and other things can help solve that. But all that being said, this is one of the ways you can kind of take some of that power back, is by understanding terpenes a little bit better.
That's really cool.
Now, next here, we're going to look at a compliance way for an edible. This is what Kendra was talking about, dosing and consistency. This is where it really, really matters. So one of the things that I want to point out about this is that this is a edible that is what I always say, geared to help with sleep. And I can tell this because it contains a cannabinoid called CBN. That wasn't the best highlight, but where the purple arrows here are, there's CBN content at 20 milligrams per unit, which ends up being about 1 milligram per piece per serving. And you see the per serving numbers here with the star. So, and then also is CBD, which is good therapeutic in THC. Also, I love about this product is that it has a 5 milligram dose of THC, whereas most edibles have 10, which is the legal limit in a dose. Well, first of all, research proves that 2 milligrams can be a therapeutic dose. Mm-hmm. And for me, just because I'm a big guy, I may want to eat 5 gummies and not just one. So, I like the idea that I get to enjoy the treat. If it tastes good, it's a good product. I'd rather have a few than have to eat a quarter gummy to make sure I don't go see the stars or something for a gummy. Now, that's something that happens with the illicit market a lot. So we're going to look at cannabinoid content, dosage, all things to help you understand where we are. Well, now let's talk about hemp products because they're way more accessible. They're online, they're cheaper, they're everywhere. We're seeing Delta 8, THCO, THCJD, all Delta 10, all kinds of what I would just try to say nonsense. These things aren't available in the plant at high enough volumes to make concentrates out of or products. So therefore, people are converting other cannabinoids like CBD into them, and those conversions create byproducts that we do not understand nor have been studied. So the difference between that and legal cannabis is that there's no chain of custody or batch control associated with hemp. So even if they have a COA saying, "Oh, we tested it," that COA does not necessarily correlate to that same batch that you're going to have that day. You cannot look at the batch number, compare it to the product labeling, and make sure it's the same. Yeah. There is also no oversight, so no recall ability. So if there is a really nasty product out there, no one is going to be able to control and let you know, hey, there's something out there. Someone found it. There's no one that helped make sure you don't continue using a bad product. And finally, people are losing their jobs. People are losing their jobs, taking these products. Government workers have good jobs. Think, oh, this is hemp. I won't get in trouble for hemp. It's just hemp. It's not cannabis. Well, a study by the National Institute of Justice just proved that the majority of samples labeled hemp are actually marijuana. The black bar here, the black taskbar here is the total product. Okay, next to it is what was actually marijuana. So really only 2 of those products they picked up were actually classified as hemp. And you see the black and the red lines are almost the same every time because almost all the products every time ended up being the majority of marijuana. So things that can make you fail a drug test and put you in a bad situation.
Yeah, give people a false sense of security, and they're taking these products and they lose their job or
exactly
more intoxicated, show up for work and put themselves in a bad situation.
Yeah. All these things. And it happens. People are losing benefits, losing jobs, losing rights to their kids over failed tests where they had no idea, what was actually going to happen.
Thanks for raising those concerns and making those points.
Yeah, it's about the consumer. We're trying to make sure they're well equipped. Next, what's going on in California? We have seen all kind of articles about recalls and potency inflation. So what's happened? Let's run through that at the end of our time here. So for years, THC has been the push to consumers as a measurement of quality. They'll even make you pay more money for a flower that has 35% THC. Ooh, ooh, ooh. My hands are waving like a snake oil preacher, but that's what's happening here. You just can't see because of my filter, but that's been pushed to us. Well, as of January 1st of this year, the DCC require all labs to use a very similar method to test for potency. We saw really quick that the median THC percent dropped almost 7% according to data addressed by Headset. So what we already knew just came to light. Is that the numbers that we were seeing weren't real. They weren't legitimate numbers, and people were, creating bias and tests to get there. Well, although it came down for a while, unfortunately, we're right back to having some inflated numbers. And we're going to talk about what labs are doing and, what's happening. And what I'll say is that if a brand has inflated numbers, the brand isn't always complicit in this. Some labs are doing this just to try to win business, and some producers are just thinking, okay, it's a licensed lab, I'm going to use them and get a number that their buyers like, and that's all that matters. They're not necessarily chasing it, but they end up getting in this sick cycle as labs get shut down, their numbers drop, then they have to change their pricing. It's just really unfortunate victims, so especially the smaller farmers out there are really, having a hard time with this. I'm gonna skip ahead too far. Yeah. So next thing we'll chat about as far as that intro there are recalls. There are 2 types of recalls. There's a mandatory recall, and the DCC defines this as initiated and ordered by the DCC. It affects all the licensees of the recall, and it happens because there's an immediate and serious threat to human life or health, or other remedies would cause an unreasonable delay. So pretty much anything that they deem as hazardous to a consumer could generate a mandatory recall. All this information, by the way, is on cannabis.ca.gov. So
I'm always sending people that website. Yeah. You don't know about the DCC. I'm like, go and learn about it. It's so easy. Cannabis.ca.gov. Exactly. Sign up for the emails. Yeah. There's so many resources on this website. It's amazing.
Yeah. They're actually tasked to help educate you too. So they have
Yes.
things to help educate the consumer. And then there's voluntary recalls, and that's when the licensees identify something that could be mislabeled, defective, or unsafe. It's initiated and implemented by the licensee, but the licensee notifies the DCC. So mandatory is forced by the agency. Voluntary is generated by the producer. Just to talk about why everyone's freaking out right now is that there have been 18 recalls in 2024. There were only 8 total recalls the first 6 years of Prop 64. So there has been a quickly accelerated bit of oversight from our regulators, and I think it's a good thing that they're going to test things off the shelf and figuring out what's going on. And then since March 29th of just this year, so just 2 months ago, not even, there have been 6 of these recalls that have potency inflation related to it. So proving that they do see this problem out there and they agree. Now we're going to walk through one of the most recent examples of the recall to show you what information is available to you as a consumer. So this is a recall for some pre-rolls. You'll see here it is mandatory. I'll just highlight some of these real quick. It's a mandatory recall, pre-rolls, when it came out, and who the licensings that were involved with it and when it was sold. So this is some of the information out there, also including the product details. This is where that batch number and UID from the COA come back to play. This is how you can correlate exactly, what it may have been for a producer or someone from the public, and then where it was sold, and then finally a picture so you can really confirm, okay, do I have this? Does it look like this? And then you check the packaging for these things up here. So this is the information all available online. The most recent one, not picking on any brand here, just public information that's out there for you to devour and understand so you can make the best choices about your shopping. Now, how is this happening? You may be thinking, like, what are labs doing? Why are they doing it? Well, the why I can't tell you, but there's different ways that, well, they're doing it because they're trying to gain business. So let me be real. They're doing it for money. Why they want to be in a space of integrity and do that, I can't answer that question for you. But how they're doing it, we do have some insight on that, and I can talk about that. So sampling. I say you're supposed to sample a random batch. Well, what if instead you only sample the top colas, the juicy ones, the ones that have all the trichomes in it? You introduce a bias in your future results by creating bias in your starting material. The next could be homogenization. You get into the lab now. Well, the DCC mandates you homogenize or grind all the flour up to where it's a consistent mixture. But because of how fine those trichomes and some of those other particles are that are highly potent, they're always going to be separated a little bit. So a lab could potentially scoop up more of that material, finer material, with the good stuff in it, and they could extract that to create a bias towards higher potency, all from the same sample that another lab will get a lower number from. There's also malpractice of the balance in the scale. The DCC requires that every lab use 0.2 grams or 200 milligrams of sample. Well, a study done by Infinite Chemical Analysis was able to prove that if you add just 40 milligrams more to 0.24 grams, or even extra 100 milligrams to that scale, you're going to start hitting these label claims. So the blue is the label claim here. The red is how the results. The red is the results when they do it the right way by DCC. The blue is what they said it was. You'll see as they start introducing more mass beyond the requirements, you get closer and closer to that label value. So it's showing that you can actually force results to look like what you're seeing, which also helps confirm that, hey, some of the stuff we're seeing isn't real, and people are clearly doing something to get there, and it's quite possible. And this is how. So they did a really
creeping the mean up.
Exactly. They did a really good study with the Beard Bros. They published it on Beard Bros website, showing a few of these tactics and how it can impact data. Next comes the dilution. Once you extract that cannabis into a solvent, you have to deliver it into a vial for testing. Well, if you over-deliver that extract, you're going to skew the numbers to a higher value than it should be. This is like saying, okay, I'm supposed to mix 50-50 extract and solvent. I'm going to put 75 extract, 25 solvent in, calculate it as if it's 50-50, though. I'm going to calculate it like it's 50-50. Same thing with the scale. I'm still going to put 200 into the calculation. I'm just delivering more product. So there's clearly an intent to deceive here, because you have to record the paperwork to make it look like you did the right thing. And that's what the DCC is now doing. They're looking at paperwork. Oh, everything looks fine. Well, let me go into your lab and see what's really going on because we don't see how you got these numbers. And then
Wow.
cal curve, people can screw with their calibration curve on their instrument to force numbers higher. And then finally, just flat out dry labbing. Some people can flat out just fudge numbers, put things into the system that weren't really true, similar to the scale and balance thing, to produce higher numbers. And unless there's active oversight and making people redo these tests in front of the DCC, sometimes it's really impossible to find out. So these are some of the things that are happening now with the increased oversight as the DCC continues to higher up and combat these things.
Yeah.
So
I know
yes,
that there's also a bill, this year too, in front of our lawmakers in California to actually to add more budget to the DCC in this area to give them some additional staffers, to give them more power to bolster the recall process, as well to give them more resources in this area. So
no, precisely. People want more oversight because, even when you see the last recall information, it was from 2023. So they want things to be more immediate. If someone's got bad things on the shelf, let's test it, get it off of there sooner. Therefore, the brands hurt a little bit more, and people for these practices actually are punished for it. So, one thing I should have said earlier, but, I don't represent the DCC. I don't, work for them. I'm not a government employee, but I sit on the advisory council. That's what we're going to talk about now. How can you provide input? Well, the DCC put together an advisory council whose job is, as they have on their website, provide valuable input to the DCC's development of regulations and standards through its comprehensive representation in each individual member's unique perspective on consumer, community, and market issues. So we host public meetings as a larger committee and several subcommittees where you can attend, provide public input on the agenda or things outside the agenda for us to then confer and make official suggestions to the DCC through the Grand Committee. So I'm the lab sub chair committee. So the laboratory subcommittee chair. So if you ever wanted to come to one of those meetings, it'd be laboratory specific. There's also a equity subcommittee, cultivation, public health and community impact subcommittee, and finally a medicinal use subcommittee is where California currently sits. So please, you can go to cannabis.ca.gov, search for Cannabis Advisory Committee, and all the information about the members, the meeting notes, the information we talked about in the past, what the agenda is for the next one, which is going to be on 6/6/2024, so coming up next month. All this stuff's available for you to collaborate, provide your input, and be heard. I will say, they can be quite active and busy, but they're important for you to attend if you want to use the means at hand to be heard. So, as a consumer, and that's important, right? We need to hear from the consumer too about what their experience is. The industry can't continue going back and forth and almost fighting with the regulators. We need the consumer to tell us what we need and want, and to be loud about it. And therefore, it will be, probably more likely to happen. So I always believe in activation. That's what ASA was founded on. Americans for Safe Access is actually getting active industries, voting, using your power as a citizen to convey what you need and to help it get done. So that is what we can talk about today. That is everything. Some of the comments were great. I appreciate everyone that was here today. Any questions for me personally, you can reach out to me on my website. We have a message drop box at www.fireconsults.com. And just thank you again, Cadence. I really enjoyed it and hope that we educate a few people here today.
And I just want to touch on that too. I love that the DCC has this cannabis advisory subcommittee, and that it's a living, breathing regulatory agency, and that they want to have feedback from the industry, from patients. And I do think that it's really important that more patients, more consumers get involved, because I love listening into the meetings and having my couple minutes of, giving some feedback when I think that's really important and somebody's not already speaking on something. And what we do hear a lot is the industry and a lot of parents that are against cannabis or have concerns. And so I do think that we need to have more, consumers and patients when there's something that's impacting them, especially in the medical realm, when they were changing the milligrams, the tinctures, when they were doing that, that's important that we have patients give feedback. And these meetings are very interesting. So even if you just have them on in the background, just to hear what's going on, Definitely, like Antonio was saying, sign up for these newsletters that come from the DCC. You will find out about the recalls that come through. You'll find out about these advisory committee meetings. You can even find out about jobs, which is really neat. The DCC is hiring in a lot of different ways. So if you have skills in other areas that are not just cannabis, they're looking to hire in many different ways. But this has been very, very interesting and great information. I do have one question. Has your subcommittee, have you guys received any input or any questions about the chain of custody, and if that has any if that has any input, if that's has to do anything with like the recalls and maybe with like the change in like the THC percentages, and like any.
Yes, I can't speak to maybe what generated each recall. Only can see what's publicly right. I'm not on the backside, but I definitely think the DCC is seeing high THC numbers and investigating your product, and they may also find out there's aspergillus on the product as well. So it allows them to initiate an immediate recall because it's unsafe. But I definitely can look, like I said, since a month and a half ago, 6 recalls have had a potency inflation kind of tag to it, or one of the things that was wrong. One of them was solely potency inflation. So I do think them seeing that move through the process and have those high numbers is definitely triggering some attention. I see a Q&A that someone asked about aspergillus hiss, and so the question is, what are my thoughts on uptaking aspergillus hiss? Spoke to 2 labs about this and learned there's no uniform testing. That is correct. There's no standardized method. What the DCC has said they've done, though, is go to a shelf, pull a sample, and test for it, and it's positive for aspergillus. Now, micro is really tricky in the sense that there's different vendors, different probes, different ways people are looking at this assay. So you most certainly can get different results from using different micro vendors. And that's something that I have suggested the DCC look into next, because it is causing a lot of confusion about, okay, well, what should a lab be testing my product with, so they can ensure that it's the same test that you're using. But my guess is that it's more of a packaging issue than anything else, because there quite frankly has not been much work done on packaging stability in our space and storage conditions. Some people, you can sell your flower and someone can store it improperly, and that's not really on you, right? So there's all these different factors that make it really tricky and not really knowing where it's coming from. But on the lab end, it's most certainly difficult with all the different assays and ways to do it.
Yeah, and that's what some industry folks I hear talking about is like maybe the DCC needs to also look at like storage and transportation, like other things as well. And so
Absolutely.
I was just wondering if like your subcommittee had looked into those kind of factors as well too.
Yeah, we fortunately have focused just on labs, but when you're GMP and different things that federally require for other industries, you have to have these kind of controls. You have to have temperature monitors all around the whole time of the life cycle, right? In the truck. Humidity, all these things, we just aren't quite there yet. And honestly, it's really expensive to do. It'd be really expensive to operate at that level, which is one of that barriers to entry that we get scared about when we talk about federal legalization and corporatization of cannabis, because you do have to raise the level of quality control. And I'm not saying you're going to produce better cannabis, but you will at least know when things do go wrong. So I see it both ways. And I think they're probably going to have a market for the medical community that is highly regulated like that, and the adult use market will continue to thrive for people, that are more comfortable with kind of how we currently see things as an industry.
Awesome. Good answer. Those are such good answers. And then one other question, just last question from the audience. This audience member is asking, there's been an uptick in aspergillus hits. They spoke to 2 different labs, and they were saying that there's no uniform testing.
That's the one I just hit on. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. So you combined the two, my question and their question.
Exactly.
I thought that you had, but I just wanted to make sure that this person's question was also answered. Perfect. Yeah, I thought that you had kind of combined those two. Perfect.
The other one there about the chemical to convert Delta 9 that you see like in Total Wine and stuff. Like people use different acids. I don't know, but the issue is sometimes there's residual acid in that drink, right? There's like, that is a risk, is that those things in Total Wine could be very unsafe because they're not tested for. And even if they were going through the regulatory of normal cannabis, we don't have some of these acids on our testing list because we don't use these processes. No one does this. No one creates this shitty product in legal cannabis. People wouldn't want it. So yeah, there's definitely concern. That's a concern with some of these new cannabinoids because we don't know how they're being made, and there's definitely residual issues of some of those products you see in total line.
Yeah. When I went in there too, because I had gone and done some research too, they don't have child safety requirements as not the same requirements that they do in California. Just really, really quick question. Somebody was asking about in different states like Connecticut, there is actual regulations around remediated cannabis products, and they have to actually have like a symbol on the front of them. I don't believe that we have the same thing in California. What do we have to have labeled on a product?
If it's been remediated, it's nothing. You have to have a clean COA. So yeah, it's not clear if something's been remediated here either, because there is some people believe that, hey, whether you've zapped the aspergillus dead or not, I don't want to have any remediated flower that could have aspergillus DNA in it. So that's definitely a concern for certain people, and that's where I think when we all put our heads together and start caring about the whole patient again, those things will come out, and those are things that I would fight for if I was a patient. I want to know this. Come speak up. Come speak up. I definitely think there's good reasons for some of these things to happen. Some of them are burdensome, but necessary. And I know the industry hates changes. They hate packaging, all this stuff, but sometimes something will eventually make more sense that we all agree on. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, and that's why we need things like the Cannabis Advisory Committee and great people like you, that don't volunteer your time to sit on, boards like this. And I'm sure it takes many, many hours of your time to meet with all these folks and, get into all these issues that are very complicated. So thank you so much, Antonio, for all the work that you've done. I've known you for many years, and you've always been one of those folks that, gives your time and, drives all around to educate people. And I really, really appreciate you and, everything that you've done, for this community. And, even when you were with CannaSafe, you were one of the companies that, did research and education to help better, the consumer market and to protect people. You've always been about that. So I really, really appreciate you.
That means the world to me more than anything you could possibly say. Shout out to everyone that we worked with and collaborated with for the better of the patient. My past employees and people like yourself, Candace, who I met doing this work. I met trying to find people to work with, and your name came up, and that's how we met. So, thanks for saying that. Those are really kind words.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you again, and to your whole team at Fire Consults, and to the whole Cannabis Advisory Committee as well, and to everybody that's watching today. Thank you guys for joining us for this episode of the Friends of the Farm Lecture Series. I hope that we were able to share some information that will help you all become better informed cannabis consumers, and that the information that we shared will help you find relief. Stay safe and well, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.